Hello, 1517 podcast listeners. This is Chad Bird, co-host of 40 Minutes in the Old Testament, with an announcement from the 1517 Podcast Network. Throughout the entire month of June, the podcast network at 1517 is launching a special fundraiser, and I need your help. Every dollar you contribute will be matched by 2 generous donors, doubling the impact of your generosity. The podcast network needs to raise $150,000 in an effort to support the ongoing creation and expansion of our shows. The funds raised will play a crucial role in expanding our network onto additional platforms, such as YouTube, and strategically reaching new audiences with the gospel. Your support isn't just a figurative donation. It's a tangible investment in the people and tools necessary to maintain and expand the work of our podcast. Please help us to reach our $150,000 goal. Simply visit www.1517.org/donate-podcast today. Thank you for being an integral partner of the 1517 podcast community and for your unwavering dedication to sharing the pure gospel through our shows.
Welcome to another episode of 40 Minutes in the Old Testament. 40 Minutes in the Old Testament is a 1517 Podcast Network podcast. You can go to 1517.org/podcast and check out all the other podcasts that are living over there. And while you're over there, make sure you go to the donate page. You've probably heard in the intro. It is June. It is the podcast celebration / fundraiser. Don't just celebrate. We want you to celebrate all the wonder that is the 1517 Podcast Network. But also, like if you go to a birthday party, you wouldn't just show up with nothing. You'd celebrate with the people, and then you'd say, hey, got a little something for you. That's what we're trying to do this June as we try to raise funds to keep the podcast network, ad-free, paywall-free, just free indeed. Is what we'd like to keep it. And so you can help us by giving to that. There's a link in the show notes. You can also just go over to the website and you can support the work over there. All right, Chad, this is episode number 2 in the book of Ecclesiastes. And we did a lot of sort of preamble last week, kind of talking about the book and the authorship and all that stuff. And then got into kind of what is the sort of introduction. It does seem that something is going to kind of change a little bit here. The first 11 verses really sort of set the tone for the book, right? And so we talked about vanity or the fleetingness of all things, the insignificance of all things, particularly if there's nothing above the sun. If everything that exists below the sun, then what exactly is the point of all this? And that's sort of where we ended up, that there's you're going to die, and not only are you going to die, but shortly after you die, generation or two, no one's going to even have a single memory of you. Even if there's a photo of you somewhere, even if someone can utter your name, there will be nobody that says, well, I remember this one time Chad and I were doing this thing. No, you're about 2 generations from that not being a possibility, which is, that's kind of a depressing thought if there is no resurrection.
Yeah, it's very, very much a depressing thought. I mean, and that's where all of this kind of horizontal thinking leads you. If there's no over the sun perspective, then ultimately everything is, as he says, vanity of vanities.
I was talking with somebody about this atheist guy that I was talking to, a friend of mine, and he was saying like that. No, like people want to build a legacy and this kind of stuff. And I was like, well, that's not the same as a memory. He's like, yes, it is. People have memory of stuff. Like, so Abraham Lincoln is in our collective memory. I'm like, no, he's not. Like, that's not true. Like, you have knowledge of the past. Nobody has any memories of Abraham Lincoln. What are you talking about? Like, there is no memory of him. There's just knowledge of him. Nobody alive could tell you what he was really like, because there's nobody that knew him. You just have information, but it's not memory.
Yeah. Yeah, that is so true. I mean, how many times have maybe it's a sports star, maybe it's an author, whoever, you know, we've learned a lot about them, watched their videos, watched their games, read their books, whatever, and we think that we know them pretty well,
Yeah,
but we actually don't, talk to their brother, sister, their child, their wife, their best friend. Now, they know them a lot better than almost anybody else does. It's kind of like that, even with the Abraham Lincolns or the Julius Caesars or the whoever's of history. I mean, we can get to know a lot of stuff about them, but do we really know the person? Yeah, not really.
yeah. There is no memory of the. Like I said, like there's no one that you could talk to that could be like, listen, I spent a lot of time with them, and they wouldn't have. They would. That's actually they wouldn't have said that. That's not something they do. That. This happens with like theologians and stuff sometimes too, where people get in arguments about like what a theologian meant by something or what he couldn't have meant by something based on who he was, and these arguments are always dumb because well you don't know. I mean,
Yeah.
all you have is like other things he's written, and maybe you could say that's inconsistent with what he's written before, but you don't know him, so you could never say he would never say that because you don't know him. You don't know what he would or would never do.
Yeah. And such is the fate of every person, right?
Yeah,
After a generation or two.
unless you got the resurrection, and then you just be like, well, I'll ask him when I see him.
Yeah, I can't wait until we have that conversation one day. So that's the introduction to everything. That's first 11 verses, and as we pointed out last time, that's in the third person. Kohelet, usually translated as teacher or preacher, is the one who's speaking. And we're going to shift now in verse 12 to first person. He's going to start out, I, Kohelet. So I, the preacher. And he is going to remind us that he has been king over Israel in Jerusalem. Sometimes that Hebrew verb is translated as was. It can be translated that way. I think a lot of translations lean today toward have been, in order not to give the impression that Solomon or the author is no longer the king. I mean, that's if I hear somebody say I was blank, my immediate assumption is, well, you're not that anymore, right? So the have been is probably a better translation of this. So I, Kohelet, have been king over Israel in Jerusalem. We already knew that. We're just reaffirming that, adding a little bit to it. But now he's going to go on and tell us what he did as king over Israel in Jerusalem. He said, I applied my heart to seek and to search out by wisdom all that is under heaven. That applied my heart literally in Hebrew is I gave my heart. One scholar translates it as I devoted myself, which I kind of like. The heart, of course, is the epicenter of the human being in the Hebrew way of thinking. So I took my innermost being, my heart, and I devoted that. I applied my heart to seek and to search out by wisdom all that is done under heaven. Of course, this is the key here. This is the interpretive key to understanding why so much of what he has to say is depressing, because this is not the over heaven or over the sun perspective. This is under heaven kind of stuff.
Yeah, when you're reading that verse, if you go back, even you can, if you're just now joining us or something, you could go back to us going through First and Second Kings, and you have this description of Solomon, and like he becomes like he's not just the king, but he's like a zoologist and he's like really into like plants, and he's trying to figure out like like let me get every spice that could possibly be discovered and make sure I can try all those, and I want to lay my eyes on every animal, and I want to see every tree, and
Mm.
this sounds like him, right? Because he was
Oh
doing
yeah,
all
yeah.
this stuff. Like there's like this curiosity and this desire to gain knowledge about everything around you. And what's interesting about it is that when you read it, when it's talking about it as a narrative, it seems like he's like kind of really enjoying these things, and like this is something that he actually enjoys doing. Like, hey, I want wood from over there to build this thing. So let's ship it all the way across the known world so I can build some monuments over here. But what also is true is that if you assume that this is whether it's Solomon or someone sort of writing as Solomon, and you know how this goes, and this is like the great temptation. If you're much older, there's this melancholiness that can set in. Maybe you devoted yourself to all these things. Now you're an old man, and you sit back and you're asking this question: what exactly was any of that worth?
Oh yeah, yeah. I mean, he's gonna make that explicit when we get into chapter 2 about, all the things that he did. Uh, and yeah, I mean, it's just like, well, I think most of us who get older do. We look back and like, what was I thinking, or was that really worth it? And Solomon, if anybody could do that, he could.
I
I mean,
think
he
that
was
I
he
think that
was.
people do that even with good things, like because I think that this is what you discover in life is that something can be very interesting to you, or maybe you're trying to do something and it matters a lot to you. It's very important to you. There's a lot of meaning attached to
Hmm.
it, and then you discover as time goes on that that meaning is only attached to you. That
Oh,
and nobody else cares
definitely.
about this stuff the way that you care about
Yeah.
this stuff, and this becomes very depressing and discouraging. Where you're like, I did all these things, and I enjoyed doing them, and I thought that they meant something, but it turns out that the
Hmm.
rest of the people in this next generation and the generation after that, as I'm watching them, they don't care about any of this. So what was
Oh,
the point?
yeah. Yeah. Right. I mean, without getting into particulars, I've seen that in the case of my own father, who passed away about a year and a half ago. I mean, some of the things that were extremely important to him, and I'm glad that they weren't extremely important to the next generation,
Mm-hmm.
or 2 generations later. I mean, and that was fine for him, but we easily kind of get the impression that we're going to be passing on to the next generation something that is going to be as important to them as it is to us. And that's just simply not the case most of the time. Most of our interests are pretty idiosyncratic, you know. For instance, just to pick a kind of a silly example, I'm sitting here recording in my study with hundreds of books around me. And I love these books. I've been collecting them for the last 30 years, and I consult them all the time. And I can tell you, I mean, I can remember where I got them, how I've used them, all this kind of stuff. Is anybody else going to care? No. you know, and that's just one example. I mean, you can multiply that many times over with things that are important to
You mean
individual
you mean
people.
you don't think your daughter is going to treasure those books the way that you do?
Yeah, it's like she's going to be looking through them. Oh, look, my dad highlighted this line. I wonder what he was thinking, or look, he scribbled a note here at the side. No, I mean, I know what's going to happen to these books when I die. They're going to get given away or sold. I mean,
Yeah.
that's just the reality. And so I think the more that we can have kind of an honest appraisal of our personal things, whatever those are that matter to us, the less the less we're going to be invested in them in the sense that we're really passing on a legacy here. Actually, no, we're not. We're
Yeah,
just,
and I know we're trying to get through this book, but I see that it's just because I see this example all the time where I live. So I live in an area that's like in the last 20 years, and I've lived here for more than 20 years, like has like grown exponentially. Like it's just blown up. And when I first moved to the area that I live in, there was tons of farmland, and there was all these farms, cattle or hay, all this stuff, all these, and these were generational farms, and they've been in the same families for a long, long time. And over the last 20 years, not the farmers, but the farmers' children don't want to be farmers. And there's
hmm
a lot of developers that want that land.
sure.
And you see in some of the farmers that are still around are, it's sackcloth and ashes as the children of their friends who were also farmers who built this thing up and probably, maybe they even inherited it from their dad or whatever, but he taught them the way. And there's all of this pride and even just sort of, there's like an ethic almost involved in it. And you're breaking some unwritten rule like that you can't just sell that to a developer so they can build 100 houses. Like, don't you
hmm
know, like the blood, the sweat, the all of that stuff? And guess what? Grandkid don't care about that because he just sold it for $5 million.
Yeah, I
And
was going to say he's looking at a lot of dollar signs here, and that's really all that matters to him.
yeah,
Yeah.
and it seems like, like I said, you could tell like some of the old timers that are still around that are holding on to this stuff when younger people are selling their farmer buddies stuff. you could tell that they feel like an injustice has been done. Like there's a lack of appreciation. Like
Oh,
it's like an act of
absolutely.
betrayal, right?
Yeah, you know how much they sacrificed to make that land what it is, and
Yeah.
to be able to pass it on. And
And I say all that to say, I think that this is what it means in that kind of way when he just says it's an unhappy business that God has given to the children of man to be busy with. Like basically, you're gonna
yeah,
be busy with building this thing, and then what's gonna happen is that no one's gonna care about that blood, sweat, and tears, and no one's gonna care about
hmm
like the sort of ethic of like keeping it in the family or whatever your situation is or whatever this situation is. And this business turns out to be like actually a very unpleasant business.
yeah, yeah. One of the commentators translated "unhappy businesses." It's a lousy job, which I kind of like. I mean, the Hebrew there, the adjective is raw, which can mean bad, evil. I mean, it can, unhappy. There's a lot of. It's one of these words with a broad range of meanings, but however you translate it, you translate it in a way that's in accord with the whole tenor of Ecclesiastes. It is unhappy. It's lousy. It's bad. It's evil. It's an evil business that God has given, right? And this is the kind of the introduction to the divine theme. So he is dealing here with life under the sun, life under heaven, but he's not simply saying there is no God, but he's saying that God has given this kind of life to us under the sun. So he's working here not with an atheistic view. He certainly has a theistic view, but he's saying that God exists for sure, and here's what he's done to us. Yeah,
Yeah.
this is what he's provided for us, an unhappy business to be unhappily busy with in the few short years of life that we have here. So he's still limiting his perspective, even though he has some theology that's that play here.
It's also like almost like the thing that maybe you did find some joy in becomes unhappy. It's like it turns to dust in your hand, right? Where you're like you thought maybe you had, maybe you were involved in something that you thought mattered, and then it turns out that this is unhappy. Like maybe the most unhappy of businesses because this only matters to me.
Yeah, yeah. And if I'm going to pass it on, then there's a high likelihood the next generation is going to mess it up anyway.
Yeah. Yep.
Which is, yeah, he'll get to
Yeah,
that
that's going to
too.
be a huge
So
theme in here. He's going to say that
yeah,
you could tell that there is like a sort of like old man on the front porch screaming at the younger generation that happens in this book for sure.
yeah. Alternate subtitle for Ecclesiastes: the old man on the porch screaming at the younger generation.
Yeah.
So verse 14 says, I have seen everything that's done under the sun. And behold, so here's his conclusion. All is hevel. It's vanity. And I love this image, striving or chasing after wind, which we talked about last time. It's a humor. It's both humorous and extremely depressing metaphor. I'm going to chase that wind down, and if I ever do catch it, I'm going to have me something. Yeah, you're going to have nothing. Just trying to spoon water out of the ocean. Good luck with that. And then he has a little proverbial saying here that exemplifies this. It's one verse: "What is crooked cannot be made straight, and what is lacking cannot be counted." So it's kind of the idea that you've got life under the sun is full of unfixable problems and unsolvable mysteries. So good luck. Good luck straightening out what's crooked, and good luck counting what isn't even there. It's just kind of another proverbial way of accenting the vanity, the emptiness, the temporality, the absurdity of life under the sun. So, verse 16, well, let's read 16 through 18. That'll take us through the end of chapter 1. I said in my heart. So he's some kind of musing here is going on. He does a lot of this. I said my heart, so I'm reflecting, I'm talking. Sometimes that has a very negative connotation, like when Jeroboam says in his heart he's going to make the golden calves. And sometimes it's just, I think this is the way that, I was sitting there thinking, we might put it.
This old man on the porch is talking to himself, and he's
Yes, right. Yeah.
He's muttering to himself some stuff here.
Yeah, little old man soliloquy. So I was talking to myself. I said in my heart, I have acquired great wisdom, surpassing all who were over me, all who were over Jerusalem before me. And my heart has had great experience of wisdom and knowledge. And I applied my heart to know wisdom and to know madness and folly. I perceived that this also is but a striving after wind. For in much wisdom is much vexation, and he who increases knowledge increases sorrow.
This is you know this is ignorance is bliss. This is what this is. He's like,
That's what this is for sure.
it's for
Yeah.
sure what it is. He's saying that. All right. What I did was decided I would try to know as many things as you can know, and the what I came to find out is that the more you know, like
Where you suffer.
the more sorrow that you have. Like better to be ignorant and be happy than to know. And by the way, that's largely true. Like if you don't want to be despairing, I'll just use like a real practical example. If you're like, listen, I can go two routes here. I can just like every 4 years in November, I can just go and just vote for somebody. Just pick my party, and I'll just like vote for that down the line, and then I'll leave, and I'm just gonna happily believe that those people are aligned with what they're working for me, and this is great. You might decide, like, the responsible thing to do and the right thing to do would be for me to like really start looking into like how politics works, and I'm gonna like really look into like how the government's run. Let me tell you something. That it will increase vexation and sorrow for you.
No, no, saying ain't so.
You might like you'll know more, but I don't know if you'll be happy that you know it.
I don't know that you will either. Yeah, I experienced that firsthand back in 2020. I was listening to a lot of political shows, a lot of political
It
podcasts,
just did it make you happier?
and my vexation levels were rising. Let me put it that way. So yeah, I kind of adopted a political ignorance is bliss to some extent as a result of that. I was thinking when just this morning, this never hit me until this morning when I was looking at these verses that one thing that Koheleth did not try, humility.
Right.
I have acquired. You imagine you and I having a conversation like Dan. I've acquired great wisdom, surpassing all who were over Texas before me. Just I've got great experience of wisdom and knowledge. So there is a certain arrogance here in his speech. Now, I'm not denying that Solomon certainly did have great knowledge and great wisdom, but come on, a little bit of humility goes a long
Yeah.
way.
Yeah.
So anyway, he did. I mean, he great wisdom and God's gift to him, in fact, was wisdom, and he strengthened that by becoming a polymath and learning biology and botany and
Yeah.
zoology and all these other things. So he did that. He's going to get he said, I also applied my heart to know wisdom and to know madness and folly. Now he's going to get to that in chapter 2. He's kind of just introducing it here. And he's telling us ahead of time. He does this repeatedly. Most of the time you and I will say, you know what? I tried this and we'll talk about this that you tried, blah, blah, blah. And at the end, you gave me your appraisal. You say, well, it was pretty good, or no, it was not good. Kohelet doesn't do that. I mean, right away, he just says, I tried this, it didn't work. It was terrible. And then he goes on to tell you what it was. He kind of gives you the conclusion up front on each of these. Uh, Madness and folly, like I said, it's going to unpack more of that in chapter 2. That's probably, I'm guessing this is probably one of these cases where it should be translated something like mad folly. So there's a term called a hendiades, which is kind of a fancy way of saying sometimes we'll say A and B. And by that we mean something like this. So we'll say it was nice and hot outside today. We mean it was nicely hot. Or I'll say, they came to the party despite the cold and weather. I really mean despite the cold weather, but we'll put an and between those two. And I think that's probably what's going on here. So when he says to know madness and folly, it probably just means mad folly.
Yeah,
using
because it almost
madness here more adjectively.
yeah, because it almost like reads like he's making it like there must be a distinction between these two things.
Yeah.
So if I was to say, like if he said, I've applied my heart to know wisdom and to know joy and sorrow, you'd be like, okay, so this is a contrast. He wants to know both
Hmm.
of these things so he can have like he can understand all things. So you gotta experience both. But madness and folly, yeah, it seems that he's talking about the same thing.
Yeah.
Yeah, I wanna know wisdom. And turns out like what I really discovered is there's a bunch of crazy people out here acting dumb.
Yeah. Yeah. Probably we could say the same thing with wisdom and knowledge. He wants to know wise knowledge. I mean,
Yeah.
it's using the two words more or less synonymously. So yeah, that's the end of chapter one. He ends it by saying, you want some vexation, get more wisdom, and you want more sorrow, then get some more knowledge. And one of the things we should accent here is that, and this comes up a lot in books, commentaries that are written on Ecclesiastes, is that what happens here is kind of the same thing that happened in the Book of Job. You kind of take your stereotypical wisdom categories where life seems a little bit predictable. You know, if you do this, then this will result, or if you do this bad thing, then this bad thing will result. And it questions not the whole not the whole wisdom genre, but it questions just how safe and secure some of these conclusions are. So most of the time, you know, you read Proverbs and they're all about increasing wisdom, right? Get more wisdom. That's what you need. You get more wisdom, and life's going to be better for you. And Koheleth is like, I'm not so sure about that.
Yeah.
Or maybe, well, that depends on your perspective, doesn't it? Because it doesn't always work out that way.
Yeah. I mean,
So anyway, that's
you
go ahead.
might think that if I could, if I could just be like the wisest person that ever lived, then I would find out the. This is what's funny, right? So if you're gonna try to figure out the meaning of life, the secret, right? The great unknown secret to happiness and the secrets of the universe, and kind of Solomon's saying like, yeah, here's the secret. It's all vanity. And so that
Hmm.
ended up being a pretty depressing discovery. Is that I did have all the wisdom, and I went out to find the meaning of life, and found out there isn't one.
Yeah.
Of course,
What
under the sun, like
under the sun?
it,
Sure.
here's a little knowledge for you. It doesn't matter.
Yeah. Yeah. Give up the quest. So let's do a little pleasure, a little hedonism. That's going to be our next step in the process. This is chapter two. So I said in my heart, again, this is the old man on the porch soliloquy going on here. Uh, Come now, I will test you with pleasure. Enjoy yourself. Kind of one of these experience the good life. So we're gonna try this out. We tried wisdom, that didn't seem to work. So let's try some pleasure. Let's enjoy ourselves for a while. And then this is what I was talking about earlier. He doesn't, before he goes on to talk about what he did, he already says, but behold, this also was vanity. So lest he be accused of leading you on, he's going to just let you know right away. Nope, this failed too.
Yeah. So this would be
He's,
like if you said, "I'm going to find out the secret and the meaning of life," and you're like, "Oh, there isn't one." Well, I guess that discovery leads me to this: that you have a finite amount of years, and so the pursuit of pleasure seems like the the best option here. I mean, you might
yeah.
if there isn't anything else, let's just I'll just do it all for me. And yeah,
Hmm.
he lets you know right away, like, yeah, that was fleeting. That was
Yeah.
vanity too.
I mean, I think there's probably gonna be some other parts of the book which may compete with this one for kind of the summation of a lot of modern life. But man, it's pretty hard to compete with this as kind of a general introduction to how a lot of people today who don't believe in God are kind of approaching life,
Mm-hmm.
you know. So this is what he says. A set of laughter, it is mad. And a pleasure, what use is it? I search with my heart. This verse is great. I searched with my heart how to cheer my body with wine. So we're try some alcohol, all right? And then he adds this in kind of parentheses. My heart's still guiding me with wisdom, and how to lay hold on folly, till I might see what was good for the children of man to do under heaven during the few days of their life. Let's stop there for a second. The reason I find this so funny, so he says, all right, I'm gonna try alcohol.
Hmm.
But he does so in such a way that he's like, no, I'm not gonna like just go out and get drunk though. Here's what I'm gonna do. I'm gonna try alcohol, but as I'm doing it, I'm gonna do it as an experiment. It's like he's not just like I'm gonna get together with friends and we're gonna go open 3 or 4 bottles of wine. You know what? We're just gonna enjoy ourselves. We're gonna tell stories. We're gonna sip wine. We're gonna laugh. We're gonna joke. It's gonna be a great evening. No, he's like, all right, I'm gonna take a sip and then more sips, and I'm gonna finish this bottle. And but the whole time I'm going to do it as a philosophical quest because my heart is going to be guided by wisdom the entire time I do it. It's just kind of a silly image here.
That is
Like this is my
that is the fun way to drink.
yeah, right. Yeah. Hmm. Let me how am I feeling right now? Yeah,
Take
little
some note.
buzz. I'm
Take
not
some
quite
notes.
intoxicated. Yeah. Pausing to take notes. Let's see. How I've had 2 glasses. Now how do I feel? Let me search this out with wisdom. It's kind of a yeah, it's kind of a silly approach to this, but that's what he did. My heart's still guiding me with wisdom. So he's going to see what good this is for the children of man to do under heaven during the few days of their life. So the accenting here the short-lived nature of our existence here, which of course is a huge biblical theme. So he introduces that, but he's not done yet. He's got a few more things here. Verse 4, he shifts more from pleasure to, I guess, what today we might call accomplishments. What have you done with your life? What would you count as your successes? What are the things that kind of your bragging rights? Well, he says, verse 4, I made great works. And listen to all these I's in here, by the way. I made great works. I built houses and planted vineyards for myself. I made myself gardens and parks and planted in them all kinds of fruit trees. I made myself pools from which to water the forest of growing trees. I bought male and female slaves and had slaves who were born in my house. I also had great possessions of herds and flocks, more than any who had been before me in Jerusalem. I also gathered for myself silver and gold and the treasures of kings and provinces. I got singers. I got singers, both men and women, and many concubines, the delight of the sons of man. So let me go ahead. I guess I'll finish this out. I'll finish 2 more verses, 3 more verses. So I became great, surpassed all who were before me in Jerusalem. Also, my wisdom remained with me. And whatever, listen to this, just whatever my eyes desired, I did not keep from them. I kept my heart from no pleasure, for my heart found pleasure in all my toil, and this was my reward for all my toil. Then I considered all that my hands had done and the toil I had expended in doing it, and behold, any guesses? Yeah, all was vanity and a striving after wind, and there was nothing to be gained under the sun. Wow. He did it all. I mean, pleasure. Yep. I mean, he did the whole alcohol thing. He did many concubines, which is the translation of that is debated, but the majority do think that is the proper translation of that. Literally in Hebrew, it's like 1 and 2 concubines, which is a unique way in which Hebrew says there were a lot. Let's put it that way. That didn't even say concubines. Literally in Hebrew, it's 1 and 2 breasts. Is
Mm.
is a way of basically saying I had a lot of women. That's his way of summarizing that. But not only that, I mean, he had entertainment. He had singers. Of course, he had plenty of possessions, riches galore. He made a lot of houses and vineyards and gardens and parks. I mean, this guy did a lot of things, and not in a not in such a way as to try and make things better for others too. Notice how many I's were in there. I
Well,
myself
dude, that's
have made
exactly what I was
myself.
gonna say. Like he says, his wisdom remained with him, so I guess it did. The
So did his selfishness, right?
Yeah, the problem is look, obviously if there's nothing under the above the sun, then yeah, indeed, what does any of it matter ultimately? Uh, However, even just in life, like I don't know, I think you figure that the sooner you figure this out, the better. Unfortunately, you don't usually don't figure it out until like you're a little bit older. But stuff done for yourself like doesn't hold up.
Doesn't even
Like
satisfy from the under the sun
no,
perspective.
it's empty. It's very empty. It's maybe good in the moment, but isn't things as you even if, whether it's building things or doing things, enjoying things, whatever it is, they're it's not durable. Like it's only good when it's being done, and it has no
Hmm.
durability. It doesn't last. Like the things that you end up being proud of or feeling like there was there's some purpose and meaning attached to them are always the things that are done in the service of others. I mean, if you have kids or if you're in a family, like you discover this that like that's the stuff that you feel good about at night. The rest of it is whatever.
Yeah. Yeah, and just to kind of build on that, you also discover, I think, the older you get, that maybe when you were younger, you took great pride in your own accomplishments. But
Yeah,
what happens the older you get, the things that make you happiest are the accomplishments of like your children or your
yeah,
grandchildren.
yeah.
I mean, it's like, so you did a great thing last week. Oh, okay, whatever. The pleasure from that is very fleeting. But your child did some, great thing, got into a great college, landed a great job, married a great person, whatever it is, you like that makes you happy. I mean that other focus definitely begins to be more of a reality. Yeah, the older you
Yeah,
get. At least that's
it
the
is
way it's
weird.
been for me.
It is weird. It's one of the things that doesn't show up really in Ecclesiastes. Like, and then I tried selflessness and pouring myself out for others. Like, that's not really one of the things that he said to his heart. Let's try sacrificial love. Let's see if that works. He doesn't. That
Yeah, that
doesn't really
is.
show up.
I mean, he tried lots of stuff, but that is one route that he did not go down.
Yeah.
Yeah, he didn't try humility and selflessness. Who knows? Maybe Ecclesiastes never would have been written if
Well,
that were the
well, I
case.
think that part of that is too is like those things only make sense if yeah you got to have something probably above the sun for that to make sense.
That perspective on life definitely is in over the sun kind of. I did not come to be served, but to serve.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that that descends from heaven, that particular perspective,
Yeah.
because yeah, it's contrary to what everything else that we experience. So yeah, I mean, I went through here and highlighted all the I's and for myself, and they're all over the
Yeah.
place. He tried it all for himself.
And,
Didn't
and
nothing
of course, I
didn't
mean the
hold
point.
anything back either.
Yeah, and of course the point of this passage. I mean, of course that's what he's going to say because the point of this is like, hey, I tried complete hedonism. I gave it a
Hmm.
shot. Just to,
Yeah.
like in this particular, obviously in this section, of course he's not worried about anyone else because that's not the experiment he's running right here.
Hmm. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, he starts out this section that we began today. The preacher. So this is very much of this is who I am. This is what I accomplished. This is what I experienced. This is what I built. And yes, I did it all for myself. And I'm here to give you my appraisal of this way of life. And it is that it's all for nothing. It's all vanity and a striving after the wind. And yeah, I mean, a lot of these things that he did, there's nothing wrong with them. I mean, it's great to build houses. And if you want to plant a vineyard, great. If you want to do a lot of things that he describes here. It's fine. Some of these in moderation, of course.
Yeah,
No concubines
never
in
say
moderation, though.
maybe not
Yeah,
concubines in moderation,
maybe not
probably.
the concubines. Yeah, yeah. Let's cut those directly out. But yeah, I mean, some of the things he did are fine. I mean, it's good to We can enjoy a glass of wine together. We can, build something together. So there's a lot of things in life which are perfectly fine to do, except if you're doing them only from the under the sun perspective, eventually you realize even the pleasure was fleeting, the enjoyment was temporary, and in the end you die. So if you want to see life in its proper perspective, then it has to be from the perspective of over the sun and not under the sun. And then that transforms, I think, all of these experiences, whether it's a good pleasure, a pleasure that God has actually given to us, or a good project that you work on. Everything is revolutionized when you're looking at things from the perspective of above, and from the perspective of everything that Christ modeled for us and giving up his life for others. Then yeah, you can be engaging in some of the same activities that unbelievers are engaged in, but your perspective is different because you're looking at things not from just this world perspective, but from the perspective of eternity.
Yeah, that's right. And that is it, man. We are out of time, so we will leave it there. Pick it up again next week. Solomon's going to try some wisdom. Maybe if you could just exercise all the wisdom, that'll be the way. And you can imagine what his conclusion is going to be there, but we're going to dig into it next episode. I'll see you then, Chad.
See you then.
Hello, 1517 Podcasts listeners. This is Caleb Keith, director of the 1517 Podcast Network, with a special announcement. Throughout the entire month of June, the Podcast Network at 1517 is hosting a special fundraiser. During the time of this fundraiser, 2 generous donors are doubling the impact of your generosity by matching dollar for dollar gifts given up to $75,000. The Podcast Network has a goal, including this match, to raise $150,000 during the month of June. These funds will play a crucial role in expanding our network onto additional platforms like YouTube and strategically reaching new audiences with direct marketing and with the creation of new types of content. Your support isn't just figurative. It's a tangible investment in the people and tools necessary to maintain and expand the work of our podcasts. People like the hosts of your favorite shows and the editors and marketing and creative teams behind the scenes that support our podcast throughout the years. Please go to 1517.org/donate-podcast today to help us reach this $150,000 goal. Thank you for being an integral partner of the 1517 Podcast community and for your unwavering dedication to sharing the pure gospel through our shows.